20 minutes. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've never been to Nottingham. I like it a lot already. It seems a really lovely city. So it's a great pleasure to be here, but not a pleasure, obviously, to be talking on this theme, which has been just awful. And in fact, what I should have been talking about now is the fact we would have finished in April of this year after the fire we had in 2014, in May of 2014. The trouble with choosing a title for a topic so far in advance, because I actually see it very organised, is that when I came back to it about 3 weeks ago, I couldn't imagine why I'd given that quote. The full quote is taken from, apart from the obvious one, that we're an educational institution at the School of Art, obviously, and we had a very large catastrophe, and it was a catastrophe this time. The full quote from G. Wells's article in 1920 was, civilization is in a race between education and catastrophe. Let us learn the truth and spread it far and wide as our circumstances allow, for truth is the greatest weapon we know. So I'd like to talk about education, about knowledge, catastrophe, and the role of truth really in both. Let me just see how it's... I'll just show you a few slides only of where we were getting to with the restoration following the fire in 2014. So that really damaged the west side of the building, the top floor, and of course the library, which was the greatest room in its greatest building. So that was certainly a tragedy at the time. So that's the roof beams going back on. That's the library piers getting rebuilt. The roof going on Studio 58, which is vertically above where the library was. This was a fantastic moment in June of 2017, from memory, 2017, where everybody was working together, the scaffolders, the glazers, the joiners, the masons, and everyone was working together in a fantastic scene in beautiful weather again in that particular summer. It was an even better one in June 18, which was really lost because of the second fire. And this was the studio coming back with the Douglas fir boards and fantastic plasterwork done by a company in Leeds that were just paying extraordinary attention to the detail of how we didn't even know the way that Mackintosh had used rough and smooth so cleverly in different surfaces. And when he just softened all the corners, whether it was stone or plaster, he just kept on softening. There weren't any hard edges. It was really a process, a journey of learning. And again, just taking back some of the very dark stain that had been applied over the woodwork over the time, just coming back to his love of expressing the material that he was using. So quite cheap material, but very beautifully fashioned. Brilliant ideas, but quite cheap materials all the time. And there you see again that lovely plasterwork going back into the ceilings. They've been long since smoothed over and filled in, and they were just kind of glossy and shiny, and it was coming back this lovely rough harl that he loved so much. And that was a library that we did lose in the first fire entirely. Nothing was left of that structure. But it was coming back, and this was in June. So we had the carcass of the library going back in, much lighter, because all that wood of the time had been painted over and stained over. And that was the prototype that was built before the main build. So we still have the prototype, which is good. Built in tulip wood, which was how Mackintosh had originally built it. And every detail of that, the architects for the project, Page Park in Glasgow, had got down to the level of detail that talked about how the hammer was swung to put in the square cut nails. Not just nails, not just screws, but square cut nails. And there was a reason for that, because a nail, a wire nail, a round nail will go in and can be pulled out, and even a screw can work its way out. But the square cut nails, the rough ones, and there was a company called the Glasgow Nail Company that we found there. They'd been bought over in America, and they'd taken the name and the machinery out of Glasgow, and it still operated. So we got the nails back over from America, and the square cut nails kind of rip into the fibres of the wood, and you can't really pull them back out, but there's an angle you have to hit it out, and all of that was very researched. This is Gus, who was the joiner, master craftsman, I should say, involved in putting the prototype in the library together. That's in there as well. And I just wanted to say, we talked in the first talk, which I thought was fantastic and fascinating, about the resilience of the institution. And Glasgow School of Art has not really drawn breath. It had to get back in gear. The fire this time happened in June. It was on the night after the degree show, graduation, last year. But this year again, it was another phenomenal year for the students, and they did, they just didn't stop. We had to look for decant accommodation, equipment, everything, but it just moved on. So that's a sad photo, because that's a moment in time before the very first fire in early 2014, when we just opened the Stephen Hall building across the road for design, and the Mackintosh was still pre any fires. But to go to some other sayings then, lightning doesn't strike twice. Well, not so, obviously, and in fact the earth gets struck by lightning apparently 100 times every second. Buildings, there's a 1 in 3,000 chance the building will be struck more than once. There's a 1 in 7,000 chance that you will be struck yourself at some point. There's a 1 in 45 million chance you'll win the lottery, so that sets it into scene. But JSA never really imagined it was going to be going through this again 4 years after the first fire. We don't know what started it yet, so I know that will be one question. The amazing, and Steve Emery's talk I found still extraordinary and wonderful, because that's exactly what happened in our fire. They were on the scene immediately. The first fire, we know how it happened. It was an accident. It was spotted and seen at the time, and the fire engines called, and they were there within 6 minutes. This time they were there within 7 minutes. But by that time it had already gone so far, and they're still investigating. So we think we will have their report at the end of the year. But because we had one fire, I suppose it's a sort of silver lining, we were, in recent memory, able to put into plan the kind of emergency planning that had been known about before the first fire, put into action after the first fire, and put into action more immediately this time. So the fire was alerted at about 11:20 on June the 15th last year. And by about, we were all there within about 15 or 20 minutes in terms of staff coming to the scene. And by about 1 o'clock we had our assurance advisors, assessors there, and it's probably easy to forget about the role of the insurer in something like this, and it might well come up later on in the day, but they of course are always around disasters all the time, so they have a huge wealth of knowledge, and the person we're dealing with was just amazing. He travels the country and he's always used to it. So he drove through in the middle of the night from Perth and was immediately organising everything in terms of some of the people had to be on the scene, making sure that we were thinking already about salvage. I mean, we were, but it was helpful to be able to talk about cash flows immediately, to actually bring people on board and things like that. So they were already exploring the insurance policies and saying, yes, you have emergency, you have debris removal, you have instant action, access to funds to do things, and that was really important, to assume the worst in your insurance policy. So we had an engineer, a contractor, the staff of the school, the press office of the school, sadly quite important, IT people, because we had to set up new command centres immediately that night. Historic Department Scotland arrived, bless them, the council itself and their planning folk, building control in particular, of course, politicians, quick to the scene, for good or ill, lawyers, very quickly as well. So that the same people that were involved in the first fire were there within hours of that second one, in the early hours of Saturday morning. And again, the lawyers also extremely important. Sadly, in a sense, lines get drawn quite quickly, and lawyers have to be there to know that you're saying the right thing or not saying the wrong things, I guess. It was helpful, because obviously we did have, I should show you some images. I don't know if I actually, sorry, I'm not going to keep that for very long, but it was a student who took the images, and that was at about midnight. So you can see between 11:20 and midnight, that's one half of the school. The part on the left is the museum, so that's in the middle. But already the entire building, from top to basement, is completely alight. And the fire brigade did go in when they arrived, and they very quickly made it a defensive. And that was the scene the next morning from the same place. The entire building, we knew by this time we were pretty certain, because we'd seen what the fire had been pretty badly lost. And indeed everything from the from the street, that, as was talked about, the red and white line, the fire brigade cordon, and a blue and white line further back for the police, and building control very much in the evacuating everyone around it, so we had to evacuate pretty well an entire city block in every direction. So it was pretty devastating for local people who have got moved out of their homes and businesses for quite a long hot summer last year. A drone was very quickly employed, and that was on the suggestion of the insurers who'd been using that more in disaster situations, and so it was really helpful for us. We didn't have this technology, or we didn't use it certainly in 2014. And we found a drone pilot who had been involved in filmmaking and had turned into drone making, so he was brilliant, actually, absolutely brilliant. He turned up and he was there every day, became part of our team for the next, basically the next 2 months, and just would go up every time he could, when there wasn't a crane jib flying over, or he was allowed to by the fire and rescue, and we shared our information with fire and rescue. And what it told us very quickly, you're not quite seeing the full intent of it there, is because at the top floor we had a concrete floor, that didn't collapse, but we knew we had a series of boxes and that the walls were pretty well holding through that series of boxes, but the lid has disappeared, and further down all the timber floors had also disappeared. So we knew that below that everything would have gone down salvage-wise in a vertical path, and we were able to start mapping things like that. The other thing that was quite important when we had the same contractor on site was that we started to test even for contaminants even at that stage, because obviously we had lead on site with the roofs, and there will have been other chromium, whatever, there will have been other materials that were used as part of the contract, so that the risk assessment and the fire plan is really important. The construction phase plan is also incredibly important to get hold of very quickly, to know from the contractor what they have on site on any given day and where it was, both for the safety of the fire crew obviously and for ourselves going in still, because we will still be going in and doing salvage and that when we're able to, which hasn't started yet for reasons I'll come back to. The speed and the accuracy and the surety of this information was incredibly important to us, because we had a real race on our hands against the council through building control, not through the conservation department, but understandably, I guess, through building control, saying that the building was dangerous and probably needed to be demolished. One part of that, without doubt, was the fact the impact on the surrounding area was so devastating. And unlike some of the photos shown in, was it Lebanon? Beirut, sorry. We had quite a hostile, and again, probably understandably, because it was an emergency evacuation in the middle of the night, quite a hostile local, immediate local community who just were told, get out of your homes, don't go back. One girl had her rabbit in the flat, things like this, you know, and it was really, some people had their passports, some people had medication, but they weren't allowed to go back in. So there was a lot of emergency planning that the council had to take on to rehome people and to find alternate prescriptions for them, and childcare and you know, kit and things. But what we had to do was to work with that community, and I think we probably didn't do it as well as we should, because it was so traumatic for us. And actually, a lot of folk had gone away for the summer as well. So, albeit a lot of people did come back, I don't think we possibly handled that as well as we probably could. But again, the access to the knowledge that we had was really useful. So our own SimViz, which is simulation and visualization, we'll hear much more about that later on from Glyn Wilson at Historic Environment Scotland. But our own team inside the school were able to look at how the building had moved or not moved, look at the steels. We had a scan done, a laser point cloud survey done of the building, and that was able to be mapped over what we now found with the building, and showed to building control that in fact it had moved in areas, but none of it had moved to an area of risk or danger. So we were allowed to go in and take off loose masonry from the top, push it into the building, so take off any extraneous load on the building itself. Unfortunately, it didn't have to, most of it get pushed down into the building. And then we could get on and start doing things like protecting wall heads. Very quickly the motor had started to come away, and again started to give those boxes that rigidity at the top of it, which I think is not too dissimilar to Clarendon, which we had a lot of discussions with down in Surrey. And the National Trust, in fact, were fantastic in lending assistance as well. So a lot of bracing, a lot of propping, and then the poor old library, which had just been rebuilt, has suffered again really badly, but because of the first fire, we know exactly the makeup of those piers, and we also know what the first fire did in terms of the microcrystalline cracking and cracking that happened in the stone. So we do know that we won't be able to save much of that this time because the heat was so great, so much worse than the first fire, in fact. And that's the condition of the stone. These are massive blocks of stone, and they've just been baked completely with the heat of the fire. On the top of the library, rather than brace it from the inside because we didn't have that strength in the stone itself, we've used a maybe, the folk who make the Bailey bridges, I think from this part-ish of the world, I think, from the Dons anyway, a Bailey bridge system, so maybe structural solutions came in and clamped this over the library tower, so that's that there. And then, again, that concrete deck has been waterproofed. And in the end, 800 tons of scaffold are holding that building together from the outside and the inside. So scaffold is coming from all over the UK to do that. It's not the, if we had time on our side, we could have maybe done the bracing more and less of the external scaffold. But we didn't, we had to throw it up. And the guys from SGB Scaffold put that scaffold on the left-hand side, which is opposite the tenement. They put it up in one weekend. They were just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal workers. But we also had to think about protecting bits of stone falling off very quickly to allow the buildings to come back in on the other side. So although we've got the scaffold up, the council, building control were, again, rightly not sure that a bit from the top could maybe just become dislodged still and could bounce and then go and hit someone. So this was just very temporary in place for about 2 weeks while we beefed up and got the other system in place. It's purely a parish, and neighbouring buildings are affected as well, so that's the O2. So again, insurance gets very complicated when you've got private sector owners and their own insurance and subrogation and all this on the other side. So having good insurance advisors and good contractors who know how to bring in a crane from Denmark in this case very quickly was really important. And it wasn't open as usual. So that we were also, we had a perfect storm because the road on the other side, the main road, was being dug up for public realm works, which was just about finished. But at that point it hadn't been finished, so the roads everywhere were shut and it really was chaotic. And they were brilliant, the council. They just came in and put in place this new system for the area. But we did get a lot. This compares quite badly with Beirut. Of what the locals were wanting, and there was a kind of conflation of what happened with building and what the council had to do in terms of their cordon, which is to keep people out of their homes and businesses, and the two became as one in people's minds. So we were the problem, it was our fault. That hasn't really gone away yet, and this has been a continual problem. As I say, the scanning, however, through our own school work was really important for us because it allowed us to more quickly convince the council there wasn't a danger. People could go back in, so we could scan those elevations, compare them as ones from a few years earlier and say there's been 3 mil of movement, that the gable is not going to fall onto that tenement in the bottom left corner. From the back. And then a kind of model of what we had left after the fire. Again, this is all point cloud data, it's not a photograph. But it's going to be really useful for us in the rebuilding of the building. And there has been a commitment to rebuild from the school once the Scottish Fire and Rescue report is out and the insurance is all dealt with. We will then want to rebuild that building. So again, the contractors were amazing, the demolition contractors, but they were given a very large, long pep talk by us at the start of the project, and they've been brilliant at just going through the whole process and making sure that they're salvaging as much of the stone as we can. What we're actually using is, I don't know if it was in any of those slides, but yes, it's capital tax with barcodes. So working on the disaster recovery, you can't chalk it on, don't paint it on, you need something that's going to last the knocks of being hoofed around various sites. So, bullocks are pretty ferocious little creatures running around fields and battering heads, so the capital tax are very robust. And we had them pre-printed with individual barcodes, so each piece of stone is allocated to a plan, to a scan of the building. We know exactly where things came from when they're coming off. That stone at the very top of the screen as well, there, the round stone in the middle of that was one that we identified earlier. It was quite difficult for the contractor to get that, but it's a really beautiful, subtle thing there in that stair tower. So we did manage to get that down, and everything else though really had to be pushed in. And this will be very difficult to clear because it's a spaghetti of scaffold and pipework and everything. In the first fire, very like some of the slides we saw earlier, the disaster recovery, the archives department did get in, so things like this were quickly taken away, frozen to get the water out of them by Harwell's conservation, and then gradually they came back to the schools. So the only thing you can say about the first fire was at least Mrs. Textiles and the same way they'd been boxed thanks to a lottery grant only the year before, so they were well protected and well digitised, and we knew everything was. So what you can say about the first fire having happened was the building was empty of its furniture, its collections. So although we lost stuff in the very first fire, everything else was still out, which was a good thing. And now we're down to looking at things like this, the square cut nails and the plasterwork. We're down to small bits that we're clinging to, but we do know fixtures in the building. We do know from past experience that metal work will be incredibly important. It will survive. I don't know in what fashion, but it will survive. The Studio 11, and there are just things, there are just nuances where that we know that it's important that we go looking for little details like this, where Mackintosh never wrote this down, but the beam ends, instead of being cut off or boxed in, he had them turned over in these little organic corbels around it, and we'll find these. These will be okay in the same way as, well, does everybody know what they are? That took me a minute. Yeah, it's the kind of workman's, obviously had their steel toe caps, steel soled boots stacked on that bit of building, so it took a while, but we found the front entrance doors, and although they were dreadful, well, the plates for it rather, they will beat back into shape. After the first fire, we found all the library lights, which are brass, and it was archaeologically catalogued, this is up to the first fire, all the bits numbered, plotted on plan, and new pieces made, and you can see an old and a new there. So the old ones are coming back in. We had to make maybe about 5, I think, and they're all finished now. They look amazing. So they will come back into the building. And similarly, luckily, the work done on the left is an original pendant from the library. On the right is the ones which are still in the joiner's workshop, and it's the care taken that to get that level of watching the one person who made all the pendants this time around was fantastic. You can't be too careful about it. You have to go with a bit of gusto. You can't go too fast either. It's just getting that confidence and watching that skill as he had developed and got it right was just a marvellous thing. I'm whizzing on here, I'm going to watch my time. I know I've got very much left. It is going to be really important that we get somehow. And a couple of other things I just wanted to say. I mean, there's a couple of expressions I had actually. One of them is a good Glasgow one, which is fur coat me knickers. I couldn't get any good images for that, but it would be quite graphic. So I'm just going to leave it with something else. But what it means to me is that we do run the danger in some ways of moving too fast and assembling all the trappings of what we think the Mackintosh is or was, without any of the foundation, that inner personality and meaning of the construction of what binds it together, its dignity and its integrity. So it's a pretty intangible subject, but it's one where we really have to be incredibly deliberate in how we are assembling the information. There is a race on certainly to get all that information even now. We did have a BIM model, we've got lots of video, the drawings, etc. And we must already not do something even now that means that we're building in areas of compromise or obsolescence or impediments to a faithful reconstruction. Or if we know we're not going to be able to do that faithfully, then we have to do it as a deliberate design decision, even though people are saying, when you rebuild it this time, everything has to be inflammable. It's a wooden building at the end of the day, but there are treatments now that you can impregnate timber with salt, salination, and that would be preferable to intumescent coatings, for instance, because that always alters it. But that wasn't a fur coat building anyway. It was the one still most fit for purpose in our estate before the first fire when we did the survey. It was made of really irregular materials, and using what we need to do is to use that process of the rebuilding to understand it and continue to assemble and ensure that we're neither sanitising it nor idealising it. It was pretty ropey in places and exquisite in others. It was utilitarian for sure, and it was fanciful beyond belief at times. And it's hard to capture nuance in a conservation statement, but somehow we have to remember what we have lost, and we have lost. And it'll depend ultimately on bringing together the right team, dogged in their pursuit of that knowledge, that education, and the right degree of humility, confidence, chutzpah, to educate themselves so that they can enjoy it, I think. I'm just going to wind up quite soon. I'll pass over that, because that's quite an old one, I know, but I still think it's for us, it's going to be ever more important now, and what we will be quizzed on a lot. These are some, this isn't, but one of the plaster casts we lost was a plaster cast called Lacune, or Leacune, and there's been already people looking at, well, we could 3D print plaster casts, we could cast them again, we could repatinate them again, there's all sorts of ways to do things. Being GSA, Leacune already was scanned again by the same SimViz team, and there's an augmented reality, which is a step beyond virtual reality, where you can actually now walk around a studio with these kind of things on your head and see the studio again, and have information pop up when you point your head at certain things and tells you the history of what happened and all the images, which is certainly fascinating. And again, the school, that resilience that is so important. Last year, one of its students won the Turner Prize, which makes it easily the most successful in the country, I think, after one of the London schools, which escapes me. Just finally, so it's my last slide, I think. Every cloud has a silver lining. It's really difficult to think about any silver linings in this catastrophe. I suppose, at least, as I say, in the first fire, because of the first fire, it was empty of its contents. But education is the key, I think. GSA has several duties. We wish to bring the building back as an integral part of our teaching infrastructure, part of the campus. It is an incredible design, which in itself educates students to appreciate light and shadow, perspective, to appreciate form, thresholds, interconnectedness, and beauty. But we also have a duty to use the project as a learning tool for new technology, and perhaps the biggest race that civilization is engaged with today is the one we're talking about all the time, and really what was the topic of the first speech, I think, about climate change and natural disasters. We can do things in this rebuild now because it has been so complete. The fire brigade lesson didn't stop the fire, it just ran out of things to burn, so there's no organic material left in the Mackintosh. But when we bring that building back, we can think about advances that are in technology now, so that the harl, which is the rear elevation, which is a lime cement harl, that cement, which is one of the biggest pollutants in terms of CO2, we could use materials that actually absorb CO2, so it makes it CO2 not just neutral but negative. It can take CO2 out of the atmosphere. It can engage with the solar forces of that big south elevation and generate electricity. We can look at using hempcrete as opposed to concrete in the floors going back in. We haven't yet, I don't think, got a solar glass that doesn't have a tint in it or an obscurity, but in 4 years' time, who knows what we'll have, so that those huge north-facing windows will actually generate electricity for the building itself. Power sockets were a huge topic in our first reconstruction. Everyone hates power sockets. Students absolutely hate power sockets, and the estates department hate them too because they trip people up, etc. And they get filthy. We will almost certainly have, brilliant, that's me. We will almost certainly have no need for power sockets in 4 years' time. The way the technology is moving, we won't have to put those things in across the entire building for every 5 plug that every student needs now for all their devices. So we won't have to pepper it with all those things. Security was going to be a horrible problem. We're going to have to look at barriers and cards. Near-field contact will probably mean we can just chip the students as they come in, and we'll know exactly where they are at all times, but they will magically open doors. I won't talk about too much else. The sprinklers is something that might come up later, and how they are built into buildings as they go along. We did have one twice, maybe, but it didn't quite happen. None of that's incompatible with faithful reconstruction. But we have to tread an honest, informed line between aesthetics, design intent, and new technology. And I think ultimately we will have a building where we will use education to actually hopefully avert future catastrophe, or certainly inform future ones and prevent. Thank you very much.